The Moscow college shooting was a tragic and horrifying event that sent shockwaves through the nation, leaving behind grief, fear, and a multitude of unanswered questions. A 20-year-old man entered a college armed with a firearm and carried out a brutal attack that claimed the lives of 13 innocent students. The incident raised critical concerns about security in educational institutions, the mental health of young individuals, and the effectiveness of law enforcement in preventing such tragedies. In the aftermath, investigators worked tirelessly to understand the shooter's background, his motives, and the circumstances that allowed the attack to take place. Meanwhile, the government, public, and media engaged in widespread discussions on how to prevent such incidents in the future, focusing on issues like gun control, mental health awareness, and institutional responsibility. The tragedy forced the nation to confront its vulnerabilities and consider the necessary changes to ensure that such an event would never happen again. As investigators delved into the shooter's history, they discovered troubling signs that, in hindsight, could have indicated his potential for violence. Reports suggested that he had been socially isolated for a long time, struggling to connect with peers and feeling alienated from society. Some accounts described him as quiet and reserved, while others noted signs of deep-seated resentment and anger. His academic records showed inconsistencies, with some suggesting he had difficulty keeping up with coursework, which might have contributed to feelings of frustration and failure. Additionally, his online activity was examined closely, as many mass shooters leave digital footprints that provide insight into their state of mind. Authorities explored whether he had been influenced by extremist ideologies, violent video content, or online forums that glorify mass violence. Some evidence suggested that he may have expressed violent thoughts on social media or had visited websites that promote harmful narratives, but it remained unclear whether any of these influences directly contributed to his decision to commit mass murder. A key question that arose after the attack was how the shooter had been able to enter the college with a firearm and carry out the massacre without immediate intervention. Security measures at the institution were brought under scrutiny, as many people wondered whether the administration had taken adequate steps to protect students and staff. Some reports suggested that there were no security personnel on duty at the time of the attack, while others indicated that emergency protocols were either outdated or poorly enforced. The lack of a swift response from law enforcement was another major concern, as every second counts in active shooter situations. The delay in neutralizing the attacker may have contributed to the high number of casualties, prompting discussions about how to improve rapid response mechanisms in educational institutions. The incident underscored the urgent need for stricter security protocols, such as metal detectors at school entrances, armed security guards, and enhanced surveillance systems to monitor suspicious activity. In the days following the attack, the nation mourned the loss of the young students whose lives were tragically cut short. Vigils were held across cities, with people lighting candles, offering prayers, and paying tribute to the victims. Social media became a platform for grief and remembrance, as users shared messages of condolences, personal stories about the victims, and calls for action to prevent future tragedies. While some individuals expressed their sorrow and solidarity, others voiced their frustration and anger, demanding accountability from authorities and questioning how such an attack was allowed to happen. Parents of students, activists, and lawmakers called for immediate reforms in school security and public safety policies. Many urged the government to implement stronger regulations on firearm ownership, improve mental health services, and introduce measures to ensure that educational institutions are better prepared to handle emergencies. The shooting ignited a fierce debate on gun control, a topic that has long been controversial in many countries. Advocates for stricter firearm regulations argued that easy access to weapons increases the likelihood of such tragedies, emphasizing the need for more thorough background checks and restrictions on firearm sales. Some proposed banning specific types of firearms, particularly those capable of causing mass casualties in a short period. Others suggested implementing a red flag law, which would allow authorities to temporarily confiscate weapons from individuals deemed a risk to themselves or others. On the other side of the debate, gun rights supporters argued that the focus should be on addressing mental health issues and ensuring better law enforcement rather than restricting firearm access. They claimed that criminals would find ways to obtain weapons illegally, and instead of disarming law-abiding citizens, the government should invest in better security measures and emergency response training. Beyond gun control, mental health awareness became a major focal point of the discussions following the tragedy. Experts emphasized that early intervention could play a critical role in preventing acts of violence. Many mass shooters have a history of untreated mental illness, including depression, paranoia, or personality disorders, which, if addressed in time, might reduce the risk of escalation to violent behavior. Schools and colleges were urged to implement better mental health programs, offering students easy access to counseling services, stress management resources, and platforms where they could talk about their problems without fear of stigma. Some proposed integrating mandatory mental health screenings into school curriculums, ensuring that students who exhibit signs of distress receive the necessary support. Additionally, teachers and staff were encouraged to undergo training to recognize warning signs of potential violence and to intervene appropriately when students display troubling behavior. Institutional accountability was another pressing concern, with many questioning whether the college had ignored or failed to act on warning signs. Some reports suggested that the shooter had exhibited aggressive tendencies in the past or made comments hinting at violent intentions. If such signs had been noticed by faculty members or classmates, could intervention have prevented the attack? This raised the need for institutions to have a structured threat assessment system in place, where reports of concerning behavior are taken seriously and addressed proactively. Schools and colleges were urged to establish teams of educators, psychologists, and security experts who could evaluate potential threats and determine appropriate actions to prevent violence. The law enforcement response was another critical aspect that came under scrutiny. Many people believed that the authorities had failed to respond quickly enough to the situation, allowing the shooter to inflict more harm before being stopped. This raised concerns about whether police forces were adequately trained to handle mass shooting scenarios. Recommendations included improving communication between law enforcement agencies, enhancing emergency response training, and ensuring that officers are equipped with the necessary resources to deal with such crises effectively. Some experts also suggested that schools should have direct communication lines with law enforcement, allowing them to report threats in real time and receive immediate assistance in case of an emergency. The long-term effects of the Moscow college shooting extended far beyond the immediate aftermath, influencing security policies, public perception, and legislative changes. Schools and colleges across the country began reassessing their security protocols, introducing new measures to protect students and staff. Governments debated changes in firearm regulations, with some regions implementing stricter background checks and others introducing policies aimed at improving mental health services. The tragedy became a global talking point, prompting discussions in other countries about how to prevent similar incidents. Some nations looked at the Moscow shooting as a case study, using the lessons learned to strengthen their own security systems and public safety initiatives. Ultimately, the Moscow college shooting was a devastating reminder of the vulnerabilities in modern society. It exposed gaps in security, mental health care, and law enforcement preparedness, highlighting the urgent need for reforms in multiple areas. While no solution can completely eliminate the risk of mass shootings, a combination of stronger security measures, better mental health support, and increased public awareness can significantly reduce the likelihood of such tragedies. The lessons learned from this incident must be used to drive meaningful change, ensuring that schools and colleges remain places of learning and safety rather than sites of fear and violence. By fostering a culture of vigilance, responsibility, and proactive intervention, society can take significant steps toward preventing such horrors from occurring again. The memory of the victims should serve as a reminder of why continued efforts in security, mental health awareness, and public safety are essential in building a safer future.